Right, this has got to be the game where Spurs kick on and establish a little bit of consistency in the Premier League. A big run of games coming up in December, kicking off with Fulham at home tomorrow. This is the team that I would go for. This is how I would set Spurs up. We're going to come on to that very shortly. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. Welcome back to anybody that has watched the channel before. Thank you for all the support. Make sure to drop a like on the video and let me know your thoughts on the team selection that I've gone for, which is this. We do these previews before every Premier League game and we do breakdowns after, so make sure to lock into that. That'll be out on Monday, hopefully talking about a Spurs victory. And this is how I think we could get it. In the last game against Man City away from home, Spurs lined up exactly like this, with Dejan Kulusevski on the right-hand side, Pat Matasar and Yves Bissouma in the midfield three with James Maddison. And this, I think, is how Spurs should go tomorrow. Brennan Johnson on the bench. Obviously started on Thursday against Roma, got a goal in that game, got a goal off the bench against Man City on Saturday last week as well. But I do just think with the threats that Fulham do pose, I think that Dejan Kulusevski is better off playing on the right-hand side on this occasion. Now, Fulham have been very good this season. Very, very good. Coming into this game off the back of a defeat, though, against Wolves at home last time out, which I don't think many people necessarily expected, but they currently sit 9th in the league. Their away record is good this season. They've won 2, they've drawn 2, they've lost 2. Those wins coming away at Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace, where they've kept a clean sheet in those ones. And I think we learned a lot about what this Fulham side are in that Palace game, which we'll come on to. They also posed Manchester City a huge threat and gave them a huge scare at the Etihad. Now, we know this Man City team isn't, it's certainly not foolproof, certainly not without Rodri. They are very, very vulnerable and very, very get-atable, which is what we saw last Saturday, right? We saw that in the Cup when we played them. I thought we'd beat them then. I thought we'd do well against them at the Etihad last week, and we did. And Fulham had a lot of success. They won this game on XG, and they should have won it. If it was only for Adama Traore missing chances. And people who watch the channel regularly will know I've come back to this game quite a lot because we've played Man City twice, and I use Fulham as an example of how vulnerable Man City could be on transition, but it also shows you what some of Fulham's strengths are. Now, it's going to be very interesting to see how they line up tomorrow. Whether they will go with Adama Traore, whether they go with Alex Iwobi on that right-hand side, Reece Nelson, Smith Rowe and Iwobi, the former Arsenal three behind the striker, have been playing very, very well recently. Smith Rowe is a player that I want to focus on a lot in this video because I think he could cause us problems tomorrow with his kind of tenacity on and off the ball, his ability to float into the half spaces, and just his overall quality. It's a much more settled back four than it was last season with Fulham, which I'll come on to as well. That midfield pivot is going to be interesting to see whether they go with Burge or Lukic. I do think it will be Pereira in there alongside them, and he is another player that we've got to watch out for his kind of runs from deep, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that shortly. Coming back to Spurs quickly before we go back onto Fulham. The reason that I think I would go with Decky in this game on the right-hand side is one, that it worked last week against Manchester City. Obviously, this is a different game. It'll be a different setup, different opponent, etc. But I just really like that Bissouma, Sarr, Maddison midfield. And Decky was obviously excellent in that free role against Roma on Thursday. But I do feel with Fulham having players like Smith Rowe, who is excellent at finding space and kind of making those late runs into the box, and the running power that they've got, whether it is Adama, whether it is Iwobi, or even someone like Reece Nelson potentially. I just think it makes sense to have Pat Matasar in that midfield on the recovery. Look, you're not going to play Sarr in the 6 with Maddison and Kulusevski ahead of him, I don't think. I think Bissouma has to play. I do like Maddison in those kind of deep pockets with Bissouma to kind of help us play out. As there will likely obviously be no Romero. I think Maddison kind of adds something to that back line. That's something that we saw at Man City. And look, with Dejan Kulusevski being able to come inside, Robinson on that left-hand side, kind of Kulusevski kind of dragging him with him into those central areas. You can get Sarr and you can kind of get Porro to get round Decky on that right wing. So I don't necessarily think you lose that much with not having Brennan Johnson in the team. Robinson is also very quick, so Brennan Johnson's pace in behind that threat is almost limited a little bit. But then again, as the game kind of goes on, obviously Robinson will like to get forward. If you look at his heat map from this season so far, he bombs up and down that touchline and creates a lot. He's always involved in what Fulham do from an attacking point of view. So if they do come out and do go at us, then obviously there will be a little bit of space in behind. But I do back us to kind of exploit that in other ways, maybe without Brennan Johnson, with the running power that we've got in Dom Solanke, who will kind of drift it maybe into these channels. Pat Matasar can go around Decky as well and kind of go around that right-hand side, and Pedro Porro as well. So I would bring Brennan Johnson on maybe in that second half when Robinson is maybe a little bit more tired from getting up and down, and try and exploit the space in behind that way. And I do think with the running power that Fulham have got and the ability, look, they are very fluid in attack as well, so I think we're going to have to be disciplined from a defensive point of view in this game. So I think going with more of a pivot with Basuma and Sarr to help us progress the ball, with Maddison in there as well, but also to help us out of possession, because they are very direct. They aren't necessarily going to press Tottenham that high up the pitch. They kind of sit in a bit of a 4-4-2 mid-block, something a little bit like this. So they're not going to get right at you and be aggressive necessarily. But we know with, like I said, they are able to transition the ball very quickly in these kind of situations with that running power. And also those kind of off-the-ball runs of someone like Alex Iwobi. In this move, he's kind of gone all the way from back to front, and they should have scored this chance here. But you think about Fulham against Palace in their last away game, which they won 2-0 and kept a clean sheet. This is kind of what I'm worried about a little bit from an attacking perspective or a defensive perspective from Spurs. Like I said, out of possession, they will kind of sit in a 4-4-2. But in possession, Smith Rowe is kind of allowed to kind of pick up. He's got freedom to kind of drift into these left channels. And you look at his heat map again from this season so far. He loves picking up the ball in these kind of half spaces, and he's really got the quality. So I think having Sarr and Basuma in there to really nullify the threat of Smith Rowe. But again, if you get tight to him, he'll go past you like that. And again, one thing I am a little bit worried about is Fulham getting into these kind of situations and being able to exploit the space that Spurs might leave at the back post. We saw that against Roma. Nelson coming inside here. Iwobi got the space at the back post to get in and get shot away. This is the goal that they scored against Palace, or Smith Rowe's first goal. Again, they're not going to press Fulham that aggressively, but they will kind of nip at your heels and pick up any balls in kind of these central positions. They prefer to win the ball back in the middle of the field rather than high up the pitch, because they know when they've got players such as Alex Iwobi, such as Emil Smith Rowe, such as Reece Nelson, such as Adama Traore, such as Pereira, such as Sander Berger. They've got really strong ball carriers to transition from defence or that midfield area to attack very quickly. But here, Smith Rowe cuts out that pass from Lacroix, and instantly he's off running kind of almost as that second striker, and the quality that he's got in these kind of positions to finish. Again here, one thing I spoke about earlier is Andreas Pereira kind of making runs from deeper positions. If he is playing in kind of this pivot with Lukic or Sander Berger, he's kind of got more license. And again, Fulham, they want possession, they want to play good football, and they want to get forward. And Pereira will have that license from that double pivot to get forward and make these kind of late runs into the box. So again, that is something that you've got to watch out for from a Spurs perspective tomorrow. One thing that has changed, though, in Fulham's back line, I said this earlier, is that the composure and the structure and the kind of solidity of that back four with the signing of Joachim Andersen from Crystal Palace, who they beat last time out. He has made such a difference to their back line, kind of, again, in and out of position from a defensive point of view, but also their ability to progress. If you think about how Spurs got joy against Fulham at home last season, it was from pressing, and it was from using Calvin Bassey as that trigger, which is something, again, Spurs can definitely look to exploit on this kind of on the left-hand side. Again, Solanke is the best pressing centre forward in the Premier League. Dominic Solanke, Dane Kulusevski, excellent presser from this side as well. Sarr so tenacious in these kind of areas. So it is something that Spurs could look to do and trigger the press when Calvin Bassey gets the ball, rather than Joachim Andersen, because Spurs got a lot of joy from that last season. But Calvin Bassey, left-footed centre-half, playing on the wrong side. Both goals came from him giving the ball away in these kind of areas. Spurs turn over. Again, I think it was Tim Ream and Bassey kind of getting each other's way there. And again, exactly the same thing. Bassey kind of forced into an area where he has to play the ball onto his right foot. Højbjerg there intercepts, and Spurs go in and score. So that is something that Spurs can definitely target tomorrow with Calvin Bassey. But Joachim Andersen has dramatically improved their ability to progress the ball from the back line. One thing they also kind of do from a defensive point of view, like I said, in terms of setting up in kind of that 4-4-2 mid-block, is that quite often Alex Iwobi will tuck in and kind of go into right-back positions to help Kenny Tete out. And now this is going to limit our ability to kind of get at them down this left-hand side. Alex Iwobi has played as a right wing-back for Everton before. The versatility of this Fulham squad is genuinely really, really impressive. When you look at the kind of profiles they've got in there of Smith Rowe, of Iwobi, of Nelson, who can kind of play anywhere across that forward line. But when you think about Alex Iwobi, it's been such a smart signing because he can really play anywhere on the pitch. Probably could do a job at right back if you needed him to. But again, he often kind of doubles up as a right back in these kind of situations with Kenny Tete to kind of help him out. Say if Tete tucks into more of a natural, more of a sort of inverted right back position, they kind of make it more of a 3. Iwobi is always there to kind of help out. This is why I think James Maddison playing in this left pocket is so important in this game, because I think trying to break them down that left-hand side is going to be tough. And we saw that left-hand side go back to a really nice state, I thought, against Man City last weekend, almost kind of early 23, 24 levels, where a lot of the time a doggy was kind of coming inside, Son kind of holding that width, and these three in Maddison, a doggy, and Son were linking up really, really nicely. And I think kind of getting a doggy into more of these central areas and as much rotation as possible to kind of drag Iwobi and Tete kind of out of those defensive positions, I think is how Spurs could get success, freeing up a little bit more room for Maddison to kind of create from deeper positions, because they are going to have to kind of come out and engage with him if they want to get the ball, which might leave more space for Son and a doggy. There's not going to be that much space in behind down that side because, like I said, Tete doesn't get forward as much as Robinson does. Like we said, if you go back and look at that heat map, Robinson is very much more up and down. Whereas if I just quickly pull up Kenny Tete and his heat map so far this season, you'll see that it isn't really the same. He will venture forward, but certainly not as much as Anthony Robinson. Although he is more comfortable, but I'd say their width and their creativity down that right-hand side definitely more comes from Iwobi or Traore rather than Kenny Tete. So Iwobi does a lot of good defensive work down that side. So they are going to try and nullify that our Spurs' left-hand side as much as possible, which is why I think having Maddison to kind of progress the ball and create from these areas, rather than if Spurs were to go with those two number 10s in Dane Kulusevski and James Maddison. If Spurs were to go with Kulusevski in the centre with Johnson on the right and just have Sarr, Kulusevski and Basuma in midfield, I just think having Maddison in that left pocket is really, really important for this game. But Fulham are good. Fulham are good. And like I said, they do often sit in kind of this 4-4-2 mid-block, but that's something kind of Ipswich did quite a lot against us. When you think about, if I go back to the Ipswich game, the Spurs-Ipswich game, Delap and Hutchinson kind of worked very much as a front two a lot of the time, in and out of possession. If I just pull this up here and quickly just get the average positions. If you look at Hutchinson and Delap here, I think that is definitely something that Smith Rowe and Jimenez will do tomorrow. But I do think Hutchinson and Delap pressed us more aggressively than what Smith Rowe and Jimenez might do. However, without Christian Romero in this game and with Radu Dragusin, I do think Fulham might look to press us a little bit more aggressively than maybe they have done away from home in other games, just because Dragusin kind of struggles that bit more on the ball. However, Ben Davies, I think, has definitely shown that he's more than capable of kind of stepping up as a ball-playing centre-half in these games. So there might be spaces to kind of exploit. And Davies, one thing that Davies has done really well, if I kind of just drag Spurs back into more of a defensive position and say if Fulham are pressing us high, let's get Spurs into the position that we definitely like in terms of our build-up. Let's just get us all back here. Make sure to drop a subscribe on the channel if you are new already. And while I'm doing this, actually, I just wanted to touch on something quite important and poignant for the game tomorrow. If anybody is going to the game tomorrow, 68th minute, I've been tagged in this quite a few times to share it. Robert Stevenson passed away on Friday the 15th of November. This is his son showing this on Twitter. He was a lifelong Spurs fan and season ticket holder who attended all home games for many years, right up until the Aston Villa game with his daughter and sons. The family will all be in attendance against Fulham this coming Sunday, and would love if everyone could please give a minute's applause in the 68th minute. This is a wish of Roberts and the family. So please do kind of get involved in that if you are at the game tomorrow, like me. But moving back to this, then, if let's just get Spurs in their positions here in terms of a build-up perspective. So you've got Jimenez kind of pressing here. Smith Rowe being more aggressive as well. Pereira, Sander Berge, Nelson, Robinson. Bassi up to the halfway line. Teti and Alex Iwobi. If Spurs are trying to play out from these kind of situations, one thing we know Spurs love to do is have rotation in this sixth position in possession when we're trying to build out. Quite often it'll be Sarr that will move into there. Quite often it'll be James Maddison that will move into there potentially. And what Spurs will often like to do, as we know, this little pass in here, the little bounce pass into the right centre back, out to the right winger, into the centre midfielder or the right back, and then Spurs can kind of drive from there. We've scored a lot of goals that way so far this season. But again, with Dragusin's kind of frailties necessarily on the ball, although they are, I think, improving definitely, they might look to be a little bit more aggressive in the press and trigger on Dragusin potentially with the energy that they have got with Smith Rowe and Nelson. However, this kind of might open up more possibilities for Spurs to potentially build down this left-hand side. Because Ben Davies, what we know Ben Davies likes to do is he quite often, if Solanke kind of moves into this position, or maybe a Doggy kind of moves into this position, or Maddison is in this position, or Sarr is in kind of this position in the left channel, what quite often Davies will do, which maybe someone like a Van der Ven won't or a Romero won't, is kind of clip this ball down the channel to kind of beat the press, and maybe that is a way that Spurs can exploit Fulham tomorrow if they do look to employ a more aggressive press with Dragusin and Davies in that back line. But that is where we're going to leave it. Like I said, I would go with Decky on the right-hand side and the Sarr, Biss, Madders midfield tomorrow. But you let me know what you think in the comments. Do give me a score prediction as well. And like I said, do make sure to get involved with this if you are going to the game tomorrow. And yeah, that's where I'll leave it for today. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for watching the Roma preview, by the way, as well. A breakdown as well. There was an issue with the Roma breakdown, a copyright issue, but that has now been sorted, thankfully. So that is now back up on the channel. It did get taken down for a while, but that is now back up. So make sure to go and get involved in that if you still want to. But this is my Fulham preview. There'll be a breakdown on Monday. There'll be some more videos during the week, and we'll be back with the Fulham breakdown. So make sure to subscribe and like, and up Spurs.